afternoon, and thank you for this time here today. It's a pleasure to meet you and to know someone who is such a prominent figure in the Star Wars, Marvel, Indiana Jones, and Harry Potter franchises. And you practically created props and sets that now live in the imagery of every fan in the world that has always dreamt about the worlds in these franchises, which were distant worlds, but you actually made them more close to us. So first of all, what I want to say is thank you for your work and also for this opportunity. I would like to talk about your career and your path during these years. So I would like to start to the first basic question. So how did you become a sculptor and then got the job first for Star Wars and then for the other franchises?
Well, I was lucky enough to be the only apprentice sculptor ever in the film industry in Great Britain. So I left school at 16, and there were 12 people before me that tried out to see if they could get the job, and they were turned down. And luckily for me, I was lucky 13. So they gave me the 4-year apprenticeship. So I was working on small British films, going to college 2 days and 2 nights a week to do life drawing, life sculpting, working on small British films. But after the 4 years that I did my apprenticeship, on the day I came out of my apprenticeship, they made me redundant because the film industry was in such a bad state in England. There were no films being made. So I went outside after that, and luckily I got a job up in London for a company that had been going 100 years, and I was doing prestigious work all around London. At the age of 20, I had a work unveiled by the Queen of England. I did Royal Coat of Arms for the Crown Court and various churches. The church had a fire, so I replaced in oak what had been burned. I spent 3 years there, and then out of the blue I had a phone call from the old guy I trained under saying that there was a film going into Elstree. It's a strange sci-fi picture with some weird figures that they needed making. Would I be interested in going back to Elstree? So, I jumped at the chance of going back. So at the beginning of 1976, in January, I went into Elstree Studios and went up to the art department, and that's where I started on Star Wars. I started off on the Stormtrooper armour, and being that it had to fit 50 different people, the way the suit was designed was in separate pieces, so that I sculpted it on an average figure, and they'd moulded someone and they cast him in plaster, and he was 5'10" tall. So that the pieces that I sculpted knew that they would work up to 6 foot, and the gaps then would become too wide, and the suit wouldn't work really that well, and down to 5'8". And then it would look wrong again because the pieces would overlap. So it worked very well for the Stormtroopers. It was a low budget film, so if now you can stop the film and see things, you'll see scenes that have slightly opened up and in the scenes, which was never noticed at the time. It was so ahead of its time anyway, the film, that everything was accepted. And then I did all the finishing work on C-3PO. A lady called Liz Moore had actually done the sculpt, and she left the picture. So I was the only sculptor left on the picture to do all the work. So I had to finish off C-3PO. I actually worked 76 days without a day off. So I was quite shattered after that. But after doing C-3PO, the designer comes to see me and said, we have a new character for you to start on. the name of the character is Darth Vader. So I went down to see John Mullo because he had a small drawing for the mask and helmet, about so big, just a simple line drawing from one angle. So I had to work the whole thing round in 3 dimension. So instead of doing one angle, I have to do it at 360 degrees. But they'd moulded Dave Prowse, who played Darth Vader, and created him in plaster. And I sculpted Darth Vader, whatever I did in clay on top of that plaster cast, knowing that whatever I did would then fit onto Dave Prowse. Otherwise, I'd be working in the black. I wouldn't know if it was going to fit him afterwards, but I knew it would fit him.
Of course.
So I did the mask and the helmet, and then I did the chest armour, the shoulder bells and the shins to Ralph McQuarrie's original concept of Vader. But people have asked me at times, why doesn't your mask look anything like Ralph McQuarrie's concept? Well, the simple answer is because I didn't work to that. I worked to John Mullo's simple drawing. I went on after that to do the Death Star droid and CZ3. They were both in the sand crawler that was in the desert in Tunisia. And CZ3 you see sitting against the wall, pretty much lifeless. The Death Star droid you do see moving about, but you also see CZ3 walking down to the cantina, where you've got all the weird characters and the group playing in there. And you've got the little scene with Harrison Ford and Greedo, who shot first, which is quite a famous line. So after that, they were the last 2 characters I did. Although I didn't really enjoy working on Star Wars, I was pleased to finish because really tired. But I was worried, what's my next project going to be? But I didn't have to wait long. I went to work on a war film, only for 3 weeks, but it was a film called The Eagles Landed. And I had some figures that they'd been shooting in the interior of a church, but then they would have lots of explosions and guns firing and all that sort of thing, so they couldn't do it in the real church. So we reproduced the interior of the church. So I sculpted the figures and some Gothic work, and then straight after that, I was lucky enough to get a call again to go out to Budapest to work on a film called Prince and the Pauper, and that was all Tudor work to do. But I was staying in a lovely old hotel in Budapest called the Geliat Hotel. It was a big old hotel that had been commandeered by the Gestapo in the war. And funny enough, when I was there in '76, because of the '56 uprising, there was still Russian troops on the streets with Kalashnikov rifles, so it was a bit nerve-wracking when you went back to the hotel if you'd been out for a meal and was going back, a bit later in the dark. But had a lovely time there, and after that, I worked on something like 70 more films. Would you like to ask me a question on any of them, or you just want me to carry on?
No, well, for example, I would like to know. What was your experience, for example, during the Indiana Jones set? Or I'm personally curious about the Throne of Asgard in Thor, because there is actually a whole set, a whole throne room. So what was the main challenge to create something that was so huge?
Well, I'll talk about Indiana Jones first, because I worked on all the trilogy, starting on Raiders of the Lost Ark. One of the jobs I did was the snake that's in front of Harrison Ford when he goes down into the snake pit, and you see a cobra. When they shoot from behind his head, they used a sheet of glass, and there's a real cobra behind, and you see it moving. And then when they shoot back towards Harrison Ford, they couldn't use the glass because they were shooting into the light and you could see the glass. So I sculpted the snake. When they look back at Harrison Ford's terrified face, it's the cobra that I sculpted. The other job that would be recognised by many people is the Ark of the Covenant. It's where the Ark is opened at the end and the German soldiers, their faces
Melting, yeah.
So yeah, that was done by two of us, the angels on the top and all the detailing on the Ark. So two of us did all that. There was other work on that film, but the film that I most enjoyed working on the trilogy was The Temple of Doom. Basically because the work that we did was really nice to do. I'll stay with snakes actually, because one of the jobs that I did do on that is the snake that I did a 14-foot python where the snake comes down out of the tree. And
You're passionate about snakes.
Yeah. And Kate Capshaw was terrified of snakes again, and it comes down onto her shoulder and she grabs it and throws it and it lands on the floor. And if you stop the film at that one point, you can see it's a lifeless snake because it was done in like a rubber material. And so even when it's coming down, the special effects got the movement there and it went onto her shoulder. But in that same scene, there's baby elephants sitting behind the actors that were in front of the fire. And they had a scene where they wanted to shoot the baby elephant's head close up with the actors. And you can't get a baby elephant to do exactly what you want it to do when the camera turns over. So I sculpted a baby elephant's head. They had wires going up the back of the neck and the trunk moved. The eyes moved up and down and across and that, and they had eyelashes and hairs were put in all down the trunk. And they used that for just the one or two close-up shots they had of that. Other jobs were the heart that the high priest plucks out of the sacrifice, and you can see the heart, boom, 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 and blood dripping off. And the production thought it'd be a good idea if I went to Harefield Heart Hospital to talk to a surgeon there, which I did. And I asked him, what's the closest heart I can get to a human? He said, the primates. Well, I couldn't get a monkey's heart just like that. So I settled for getting a sheep's heart, which they got me from the butcher's somewhere. And I had a plastic model of that they use in the hospitals just to let me know exactly where the main arteries come off of the heart. Yeah. So I used that and I sculpted the heart. But as I was leaving the hospital, the surgeon said to me, I'm doing open heart surgery tomorrow. Would you like to come along and watch? It didn't take me very long at all to say thanks, but no thanks. And so yeah, I used what I had to do that job.
I would like to know more, but not that much.
Yeah, exactly. There was lots of other work I did that. The opening sequence, that there's a gong, and they focus on the Paramount Mountains, and as they pull away, you see the dragon, then you see a gong, and the gong drops to the floor and it rolls over, and you see bullet holes appear in it. Well, that gong, I spent 2 weeks doing a gong where the dragon went all the way around, and it had the Paramount Mountains in the middle, and I was pleased with it. I'd made a good job of it, and I'd had a lot of time, 2 weeks. And then the art department come in and said, well, we love it, but we've got the scale wrong. The Paramount Mountains aren't big enough to pan back from. So what you actually see on the screen with the Paramount Mountains going all the way across and the dragon on top, I had 2 days to do. It's just one of those things. But there was lots more work that I did on Temple of Doom and enjoyed it all.
I have like a personal curiosity about, as I was saying, about the throne room in Asgard for the Thor movies. What was the main challenge to create a whole throne room?
Well, there's not that much of a challenge because it's all broken down into panels or the three huge balls behind them for each of the kings, his father, Thor, and his grandfather. There were three there, so I sculpted one, and it was all straps interlaced. And I got them to spin a great big circle in plaster, so it was a half circle. Drew it all on it and carved it with wood carving tools. Then they moulded that, cast three out, and painted them, and they were put up on the wall. The columns, there were lots of different ornate panels. One of the panels, they set, unbeknownst to me, they didn't tell me they were doing it, but they set me up against the 3D printer. And they got me to sculpt a panel in clay, and I aged it all as the designer wanted it. And the designer loved that. And then they got the 3D printer to do one. And the construction manager wants to know which one would be cheaper. So I come out at £1,800 for the time I'd spent on it. 3D printer was £2,800, so it was much more expensive. And they got another sculptor to age the 3D printed one, which is in a plastic. So as he was knocking bit, he couldn't age it properly. It would just knock a lump out, and it wouldn't marry across. So you'd have pristine bits with bits knocked out, and it looked totally wrong. And the designer hated it. And the last straw was they discovered they had the panel 1/8 of an inch too wide. So I quickly got a rule and I took 1/16 of an inch off one side, 1/16 off the other side, and it was perfect, right size. They would have had to have reprogrammed the computer to do a panel in the 3D printer that was 1/8 of an inch narrower.
So you just use the ruler.
Yeah. And the designer said, that's it, no more 3D printers on this picture. So I won out that time, but the 3D printers have been getting better and better. And I retired 5 years ago, and I think I retired just at the right time because, you know, it's taken more and more work from sculptors. But,
talking about Star Wars again, I would like to talk a little bit more about your experience during the works of the Darth Vader suit, because Darth Vader nowadays is one of the most recognizable character of all time, and he's also changed completely the way we see villain, especially behind the mask. He's scary as hell, but there is also something about him that one can somehow understand what he's feeling and what he's going through. Like he has his own expression. There are like two parts on his helmet, because there are the upper part, which is more smooth, rounded, with the roundy eyes popping out, and then there is a sort of contrast with the straights and edges of the lower part. And you also actually anticipated an element about the Ralph McQuarrie's artworks, so I will not ask that again, but what was the process behind the helmet, and how did you achieve this incredible result?
Well, I didn't do it totally symmetrical. One cheek goes up, one goes down, because wanted it to have character, like a human head. If you cut it in half and reverse it round, or you take one side and you put it round to the other side, someone would look totally different. I saw one from Harrison Ford Day, and you wouldn't think it was Harrison Ford.
Really?
And it's that not being symmetrical that gives someone character. So I wanted to do that with Darth Vader to a point. But the actual process of doing it was, I was to the point where I did the mask first. I did the mask back and front, but Dave Prowse was so claustrophobic in it that they threw the back of it away. They connected the helmet to the mask, and that way you could take it off quite quickly, and it wasn't quite so claustrophobic for him and hot. So when I'd done the mask, they moulded that, they cast it in plaster, and then I sculpted the clay helmet on top of that plaster mask, and then they could mould using the plaster as a moulding ground to do the helmet, and knew that it would fit back onto the mask afterwards. After I'd finished with it, they moulded it, they cast it in fiberglass, and that's what Dave Prowse wore with a certain amount of sponge put inside to make it more comfortable for him. It was obviously, I didn't do the painting of it, that went on to another department where they did the painting. The little tasks that they put on, that they were turned by the engineering shop and applied by the special effects. So it went through a few departments. I just did what Vader looks like, so I was responsible for that.
Okay. I have just one last question for you. Did you wish, even for a moment, to dress Vader's suit?
Sorry, what?
Did you wish even for a moment to wear Vader's suit, or are you content with just being the sculpture behind the mask?
I always was content with being the sculptor and behind the scenes and such. I mean, since I've been doing conventions, I've done talks all over the world at different conventions, universities, and that. So I've got used to talking now. I was extremely nervous when I first did it, but I'm very used to talking now on stage or wherever I'm doing it. Even in Split University recently, the place we were, they had a great big screen at the back, they had a screen behind me. The tables went the whole length, and every single person had a mic. So when it came to the Q&A, they could all turn their own mic on, ask a question, and then turn it off when they got their answer. So yeah, I'm used to it. But the 48 years that I worked in the film industry, I was quite content to be behind the scenes doing all this lovely work. I mean, no one knew that I did that work, of course, until 2008 I started doing conventions. We have a website now, we've written 3 books. Yes. So it's getting to the point now I'm pretty well known for not only Vader, but the other work I've done now. Yes, that's on the website. I mean, there's a huge amount of work that isn't on the website, but you can't put everything on.
Even if you are not an actor, you have been such an important part of these franchises. So we can just thank you for because your work really did make the difference. So really, thank you.
Thank you.